it was kind of a big trend, at least for me, that I observed, is I'd go and I'd investigate an application and I would find a website tied to it, and it'd be an AI email application where it'll help you with like, some GPT model back end to write your emails or send them for some reason. And they all had like kind of the same website structure, which was interesting. Couldn't tell if they're connected or not, but
Hmm.
they all had a lot of permissions that were kind of questionable, but they weren't doing anything malicious. And so it was kind of the category that they fell into.
We've got an awesome, kind of an awesome story, and I think just and some kind of tips and some content to go through today. So we're joined today by Alex and Harrison from our threat hunting team. Say hi, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. Obviously, like Dave here as always, and I didn't make the cut for the slide with the faces on it, but I'm obviously here, not as always, but as I am occasionally as well. So we're gonna walk through on the docket today. We've just got one item, and like this is we've got a good bit of stuff to get through, and we want to make time for questions. So. We'll be minding the chat as we're going through this. If you do have like questions, observations, things you want to share, please just drop them in the chat, but we will take them at the end just in case Alex and Harrison kind of walked through the answer to your question between like during the course of the presentation. So topic today, which is awesome, is just like looking at Azure OAuth applications. Got a really neat kind of story here. I think that they'll share up front, which is just, like how they kind of came upon like looking at doing threat hunting inside of OAuth and like how we kind of separate good from bad there. So I'm going to turn it right over to Alex and Harrison to dive right in. This is what we're going to cover today, just so everyone's calibrated. But we'll go ahead and get started just with like a brief intro to Azure OAuth at the start, and then we'll go from there. So I'll turn it over to y'all.
All right, so just to quickly cover it, to make sure we're all on the same page. So we're going to go over what OAuth is. So it stands for Open Authorization. It feels like it should stand for authentication, but unfortunately it doesn't. It is a standard that allows you to authorize an application or service to sign in securely. And so when you do that, you're granting an application the rights to access certain resources, and it can do it on your behalf. Um, and a lot of the times these resources can be protected. There's some that are more sensitive than others, and some that may seem benign that might not be, which in our threat hunt, we kind of discovered one, which Alex will cover here shortly, that fit that bill. So when you have an OAuth application, um, tokens are used to prove your identity and to allow you or authorize you to interact with the different services within Azure on your behalf. Um, and then something that some folks may or may not know would be that both users and administrators can grant an OAuth application access to use resources. But this is something that you can configure within Entra ID, which we'll walk you through real quick here towards the end. So Alex, do you want to go over one of the fun little things we found here?
Absolutely. All right, so this is kind of a real attack we saw in the wild. And it's just kind of a quick timeline of how it played out here. So typically OAuth attacks, OAuth app attacks start with the delivery being kind of through a social engineering means or via just kind of phishing lure saying, hey, you need to install this app. And this could be either like Trojanized or just inherently malicious itself. So from this example that we did see, the step 2 here, the app kind of sat dormant for around 90 days, just sitting, gathering information, reading, sent information from the user's mailbox, subjects lines, and just getting kind of a baseline of, hey, how does this user communicate? What type of communication happens within this line of business? Which then led them to their next phase, which was in a very successful internal phishing campaign. So because they had done that reconnaissance phase of just kind of reading and understanding what was going on in their environment, the phishing messages they sent out were not only from a trusted user, but also kind of aligned with the conversations that these users were used to having, which again, being super successful led to
When
a
I
large
was
amount.
12 years old, my
Sorry, a large amount of lateral movement within the environment, compromising a good amount of users. And one really important thing I want to note here is at the end of this attack, going through, change users' passwords, change all active sessions, or cycle all active sessions for these users. Until you find the root cause OAuth app, this attack chain is still not done, as it could kind of reinitiate from that original point unless you go and actually remove that OAuth app from the start. And we'll kind of show how you can sniff those out and find and remove them coming here forward.
So if I could just take a break here, or interject or ask a question. So I think in this case, like we're talking through, like I think folks are already kind of chatting about just like, the desire to block this stuff or restrict it to admins. Do we know in this particular incident? So like we kind of saw this, like this customer onboarded with us, I think after stages 1 and 2 had already happened, right? And then, so what we saw was 3 and 4. That's kind of the point at which we got involved. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
And do we, and let me know if you're going to cover this later, but in this particular incident, do we know whether it was just a user like installed OAuth app or whether like an admin was tricked into doing it in this particular case?
So we don't have the actual email or communication that led to it, but it was a fairly non-privileged user. So it likely just a phishing or social engineering that led there.
Awesome. All right, cool. No, appreciate that. Yeah, this is fascinating to me. It's the first kind of like real life case story I've heard about. Like I heard of the kind of the phone call coming from inside the house, I guess, when it with respect to phishing, or at least the first one like I've seen personally. Have we seen these since? Just out of curiosity.
So we've done some good bit of hunting on these, kind of looking for suspicious and abnormal amounts of activity from them. We haven't seen as many of these kind of go off and do huge phishing campaigns. So it's not super rampant, we're not seeing, but we do see a good amount of OAuth apps that are highly permissioned and in a position where they could be used maliciously. So
There's a lot of AI apps that
yeah,
they're suspicious, but you can't tell if they're going to do something bad in the future or not, I think would be a way to put it.
And actually, I know we wanted to save questions for the end, but but Kenneth was asking how we caught him in this particular case, and I think Dave surmised that it was the internal phishing. Is that correct? Is that kind of was that the tip off?
that's correct. Yes.
Awesome. Cool.
Yeah, the whole reason I hate this whole OAuth thing is, I mean, Chris triggered or mentioned this as well. The vast majority of OAuth requests just ask for a stupid number of permissions. But what I particularly hate about it is that if you reset that user's password, it has absolutely no impact on those OAuth tokens, right? And so it's like this whole other vector of access into the environment that we just sort of forget about. I think specifically because I think was it you, Harrison, that said at the beginning that we think of it as OAuth as being authentication, but it's actually just authorization, which feels like a semantic difference, but is like just a huge world of difference.
Yep, that's correct.
All right. Cool. All right. Well, yeah, appreciate you taking a second to just clarify a couple of things there. All right, cool. So let's move on. We'll talk through what the delivery aspect of this looks like.
Yeah. So to that point of delivery, there's a little example email, silly, but just kind of like a Trojanized AI app of how someone could get tricked into installing one of these, saying, hey, this is cool. It's going to help out your mail flow. if you were to click into that hyperlink there, it's going to pull up a Microsoft page and you'll get prompted with this little box here. So key things for this is, it's going to have the user email of who's actually authorizing this, the application name. You can see that unverified as well. We'll get a little bit more into what that means and doesn't mean, but it is important for a lot of apps to kind of look for that verification. And then you can see what it would like to do here. And this is an example of a malicious, a true malicious app right here. The users at this point really only have the ability to just accept or deny. They can't really do any more additional auditing. So a lot of this is going to come down to just kind of admin-based controls to prevent them from maybe getting this point or being allowed to do certain permissions, and just user training to say, hey, you should not be allowing certain things into your environment that you might not understand. Okay.
Awesome. All right, cool. So yeah, we'll shift and talk through how to go through and audit these.
Yep. So if you do have the proper Defender licensing, you will be able to see some of your cloud apps in your Defender portal. And I just want to kind of show the difference between a legitimate OAuth app and a true malicious one. So key things here, just start, you're going to have the name of the app. The name of the app can be spoofed, and obviously it can be, Trojanized. Like they could just say, hey, this is Zoom, but it's a straight up malicious OAuth app. So don't go purely off of that. The next thing down that's really a key point is that publisher. So you can see on this top one, it's Microsoft Corporation, and there's a blue check mark, which indicates that this is a verified publisher, verified by Microsoft. Next thing down is the app ID. This is going to be the main way you're going to track the application through your environment. Then if you move up kind of towards the top, you can see the authorized by, and then you're going to see 2 users. So this is the how prevalent this is in your in particular environment. Next over, you can see permission level being high, and then the exact permissions below that. And then right under that, you can see community use is common. So community use in this case is how prevalent is this application amongst other Azure tenants. So then to move down to the next row, we have Horizon Tech. So this is that true malicious OAuth app that we observed doing that phishing campaign. You can see Horizon Tech is the name. One key thing here is you can see the publisher name, Horizon Technology Solutions, does in fact have a blue check mark. So this is either a compromised publisher or a publisher who kind of slipped through the publication process and was going to just do malicious stuff from the get-go. Back up to that authorized by section, we see 1 user. So typically within your OAuth apps, it's going to be a little bit more widespread. It's going to be something that, enterprise app level, you're going to see usually more than 1 person in your environment using it. We can see those permissions being fairly high for this application. And then a real key part here is that community use being rare. So this is not only saying that only 1 person in your environment has this, but it's also saying barely any other Azure tenants have this either. So this is likely a very directly crafted app towards the user in your environment. So.
Hey, so if there's someone that's mounting sort of a larger campaign with these types of OAuth apps, I can imagine that community use might be fairly high at the outbreak. Does that assessment from Defender take that into account? Do you know? Or is there stuff going on that to identify things that are like active campaigns and to give signal about that?
So I don't know the exact kind of sauce how they calculate that usage, but from my experience, every time we've looked into semi-unique looking ones, it takes a lot to move the needle on from rare to common. So I imagine it takes into context kind of how new the app is, and it's going to need to hit a lot of environments before you hit that commonality.
Okay, so it's a pretty big lift to get an OAuth app up out of the rare category.
Yeah, that's what it seems like.
Okay.
I think one of the things we encountered were like apps that were new versions that we knew were legitimate. It'd be like some new Microsoft app, less common, or a new Adobe app, and it'd say that its community usage was rare, but it was just a new version that they'd released recently. So
Oh yeah, that's yeah. It's funny just kind of thinking back to like attacks and problems we've dealt with forever. It's like stolen signing certs and stuff like that. And so I guess like the same principle can apply here, which is, you get access to like standard developer supply chain stuff that I think we've kind of been talking through off and on for like feels like months now. But yeah, this is definitely a novel application of that.
Yeah.
Sweet. All right, cool. We'll shift gears onto the Entra side.
So yeah, to kind of search in Defender, you'll end up going to your Entra application portal. It's a little bit more in depth, but from there you'd select the Enterprise Applications tab. This will list the different OAuth applications within your enterprise. And then you can just kind of select the app that you want to, take a look at and inspect. Um, so at the start, you'll notice in this example, there is the name, homepage URL, and the application ID. A lot of the applications IDs you can kind of search for within, you can kind of Google them and find a Microsoft article if it's related to Microsoft. I bring that up because malicious OAuth apps like to pretend to be legitimate apps, of course, and so they'll pretend to be, a Microsoft app or a Zoom app or an Adobe app or something to that effect, just to kind of hide and be able to lie in wait a bit longer. Um, so to the left there in that image, there's a couple of boxes. These are going to be things that you're going to want to check out. You're going to want to see what users and groups are attributed to the app. You're going to check the single sign-on tab, owners, roles and administrators, and then of course the permissions and conditional access um, to see what all this application would have access to, what it could do on behalf of users, and to get an idea of its scope. Um, okay.
Sweet.
And then from here, of course, you're going to want to see the activity. This application that I looked at, I didn't have the roles of a, super admin like some of you might have within this environment, but you can see, there is some sign-in logs. You can check the usage and insights of the various applications and the audit logs. And what you're going to be looking for are, hey, I've never seen this application sending mail. Suddenly it's sending emails. Okay, well, that might be an indicator that, this is trying to do phishing as a user. Or yeah, you're going to look for a lot of those rare permissions being used and leveraged by the application in order to kind of determine, is this good? Is this bad? And then from there, you can make the decision whether or not you want to block that application.
Just to be clear, like those when it says audit logs, that's actually Azure audit. Is that correct? There was a question that came in specific to the log type, and if you're going to cover that later, let me know. But I didn't.
Yes, I believe they are
Okay,
Azure audit logs.
sweet, awesome. All right, cool. So yeah, like maybe before we jump into questions, kind of yeah, let's tie off by kind of summarizing the takeaways between legit and suspicious.
So these are just a couple boxes. Unfortunately, all of these kind of have a bit of, I want to say jazz to determining whether or not it's bad or not, because if it'll have, if it's legitimate, common community use is something that's great to kind of look out for. Only permissions for what is necessary. That is going to be a piece that I want to say most of the apps that we've looked at that are legitimate too are a little bit over provisioned, but it is something that you can actively tune for an application if you don't think that it should have a specific permission. Usually you can remove it or change it. Um, yeah, you'll have few unused permissions, and then it'll come from a verifiable, reputable source. If you have your vendor saying, hey, this is our OAuth app, we need you to install this, and you have a good relationship with that vendor, you know who they are, it's probably more legitimate than, hey, I followed a random Google link that says this is going to help me with AI in my email, um, and leaving it up to chance.
And I know you have a passing mention here about these AI apps. So like, it seems like I'm assuming this is just kind of the lore that seems to be working now since everyone's trying to get access to the latest AI tools. Like that's just the spike that you all happen to observe.
It was kind of a big trend, at least for me, that I observed is I'd go and I'd investigate an application and I would find a website tied to it, and it'd be an AI email application where it'll help you with like, some GPT model backend to write your emails or send them for some reason. And they all had like kind of the same website structure, which was interesting. Couldn't tell if they're connected or not, but
Hmm.
they all had a lot of permissions that were kind of questionable, but they weren't doing anything malicious. And so it's kind of the category that they fell into.
Oh, I have another question about those, but I'm gonna hang on to that for later once we've had a kind of chance to run through the prevention aspects and some of the research.
Yes, so within Azure, you can tighten down some of these permissions so that way your users can't just go and click accept all day long, every day. This link right here, this portal.azure.com, I believe it will work for you to get to the consent policies. It'll lead you to the first tab on the left, which is not the one that's that we're showing you, but it'll give you the user setting to not allow users to consent to applications. This is the one that it suggests that you have selected if you can. And then if you can select it, the next thing you can do is go down to your admin consent settings, which is another tab. And you can adjust it to kind of make that user experience a little bit better, where they can request an application to be reviewed by you before it's accepted. And then, because we all know it's difficult to get things blocked or to take rights away from users, they don't really appreciate that. You can go and change the permission classifications to kind of fit your risk appetite for the applications. That gray box there, those are all different permissions for the different applications, things like mail.send, mail.read, things like that.
Yeah, so one of the things to keep in mind is if you are undertaking clawing those user consents back, like it's super important to go back and do an audit of the things that are already in your environment with OAuth enabled. I remember a couple years ago having to go through and do that and go through all the wailing and gnashing of teeth of pulling those apps back, not just the permission to authorize them, but also the need to exclude them. And one of the things that was really important in that conversation was pointing out that if you've got a data protection policy, you're effectively, especially if you're granting access, broad access, you're giving this third party access to probably way more data than you think you are. I remember reviewing apps that they gave complete read access to however much that user had access to in Google Drive, right? And it's not like bringing in there that into that conversation the risk that application poses to just your control of where your data footprint is really an important part of that conversation. And to point out that folks they're not authorized unilaterally to just yeet the data they have access to some rando on the internet, which is exactly what wiring up one of these applications does.
Yeah, and it's
By the way,
pretty
that's a technical term, yeet the data to
Yeah.
some rando on the internet.
Dude,
That's in our policies. Don't yeet data to randos.
this is a capstone moment in Dave's career. Cool. All right. So yeah, let's take us out a little bit of additional reading, and then we're going to go through. There's some questions and stuff I'd like to get to in here, but walk us through what you got here.
Yeah, so again, to get to your OAuth, registration settings, that'd be that first link that's there. The second one is a how-to that Microsoft has written up on managing cloud applications. I would suggest going through that. It provides some great information. Not all Microsoft docs are bad anymore. I think that changed, the trend is shifting. Anyway, then there's also a Defender query here that we have selected. You can modify this to fit your environment, but you will need Defender for Cloud Apps for this to work, and the OAuth app information table. And so what you'll do is you'll just modify that minimum users value to kind of specify, hey, if I see you know, a user consented to an application and I see less than, 10 or 20 users have consented to it, maybe I want to take a look at that app just to make sure that it is what I think it is or what they thought it is.
And to be clear, really, like this query only applies this query as it stands, like primarily applies to environments where user consent is allowed. Obviously, you could still go hunt through stuff that admins have allowed, which is like, a kind of different aspect of the problem. But this is really specific to like if you've got an environment where user consent today is okay, um, your recommendation is that folks start by doing this and kind of get the lay of the land in terms of what users have accepted. Is that right?
Yep, that's correct. And it will be for external applications too. There's that app origin is external.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Yep.
The there was all right, cool. So we've got a couple questions here. I'm going to take the last thing that came in because I'm actually not sure I understand the question, but there was a question that says, how expensive is it to host an internal service? It and like Raul, maybe if you could clarify, are you referring to like when you say like app origin external, is that what you're referring to? Or what would be an example of an app origin that's internal, just something you self-publish into your tenant?
Oh, AI internally hosted.
Yeah,
Oh,
so
got it.
I was asking someone about how they handle requests for AI apps, right? So
Oh,
to your
gotcha.
question, Ro, we actually host a thing called Light LLM, which is
Mhm.
basically a front end that can proxy to a bunch of different AI services. And we proxy those to different models in our Azure Open AI instance. That was how we did it when we were Red Canary by ourselves. There's a very similar pattern that is applied here at Zscaler. It seems to be the way that a lot of folks are going, where you just say like, we're going to direct all AI type tooling towards this proxy that can talk to different backends as users select. And so I can't speak to what the cost is because I think a lot of that cost is going to be the AI processing of the models that you host yourselves. But the proxy itself is probably a minimal cost. Like Light LLM is an open source product, and you can host it in your own environment.
There's another question too. So like, and I don't think we've published anything on this before, but like, Harrison, Alex, are you aware of any other like blogs or briefings, whether it's ours or otherwise? I don't believe we've published this, although we should. But any other resources, like aside from like the kind of this, like the authoritative Microsoft stuff, have you come across other research related to this type of attack that's been like, that was helpful to you?
Yeah, I can find some links that I use to help me generate some of this hunt
Um,
information.
Yeah, if there are any, dropping them in there would be awesome. And I had one more question earlier that I kind of held. So when you find these, or if someone else finds them, I assume you can go through like any app store and report a malicious application. Like, has your experience been that these things are getting like interdicted or taken down by Microsoft quickly? Two-part question. Second one is like, is there for folks that want to go like hunt for specific malicious apps? Is there a registry of these things somewhere? Have you found a place where like when we or others find them, like do those app IDs get published? Is it's not a thing like are there indicators for this that folks can go look for beyond just the like the login activity?
So I can speak to the open source kind of like gathering of these malicious app IDs. There are a couple projects out there I've seen that are kind of trying to compile a list of these. I don't think any are fully fleshed out yet and have too much traction. So definitely room to uh, work on that as security community as we're growing on hunting this type of thing. I can try and find the links to that in a moment here though.
Cool.
Yeah, I haven't. I'm with Alex.
So OAuth
No,
token theft, that implies that the tokens are sitting somewhere on a local device. Are we seeing stealers targeting those things?
This article, what it describes is somebody registering an OAuth application for a user, and then that OAuth application can request to log in on behalf of the user, and so they can just gain access to the environment in that manner. And so this was one of the things that we looked at. Another um, thing that we looked at was we looked at for some specific OAuth phishing, where the OAuth application is tried to be registered as a result of somebody doing something like clicking on a link from Outlook, or an application launching and trying to register an app so they can. I think the specific one that I saw most frequently was an app that says whether or not you're in a meeting with a light that turns on and off. So, um, yeah.
That's yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that with the question about the token stealing, because I know like we have absolutely covered, and I think in almost all of our published threat research, threat detection report, our monthly Intel Insights, like stealers going after tokens in particular, has been a common theme. But most of what we've reported on and seen have been like more traditional stealer malware getting put on a Mac OS or a Windows system, and then taking those things like from memory or from the browser. So that's a really, I know obviously like in this particular incident that we highlighted earlier, it was used to send phishing from inside of the organization. But um, yeah, that's like a directly analogous kind of like threat or risk there, which is like just an alternative means of getting what stealer malware has been after for some time, which is yeah, it's worth calling out. Well, hey, really appreciate this. We're at time. Alex, Harrison, thank you so much. Like this was awesome.
Yeah,
Hope
great
everyone
job, guys.
enjoyed the discussion. And we can and should get this, get the details of this out on the blog. I think it would be super useful for folks. So we will. And this, there was a question here that came up earlier. All of these, like, we don't publish the slides, but this recording will be up on YouTube within a couple days. So, like, all this content will be available in some form or fashion very shortly for y'all. Thanks again for coming. We'll see y'all next week.
See you, everyone.
Cheers.